Welcome to episode 3, part 2 of the 1 to 10 podcast with 110 Associates. Our aim or purpose behind this podcast is to speak with a group of currently serving CFOs or COOs within the fund management industry. Our view is to share insights, create some dialogue, and hopefully inspire those who are either seeking to eventually reach the C-suite level in their own careers, or indeed share ideas with those who are already in such positions. Part 1, we heard from Malcolm Goddard of Zetland Capital about his journey to date, lessons he's learned along the way, and the importance of genuinely building a strong culture across teams and organizations. We're now about to head into part 2, where we will hear more insights from Malcolm with a specific focus on his views around hiring and building teams, whilst also detailing the challenges faced by CFOs and COOs in today's ever-changing world. I hope you will find this as interesting and useful as I enjoyed hearing Malcolm's story and views. Here we go. Or the next 2 questions, shall I say? And I guess it's time for me to be a bit self-serving now, Malcolm.
Go on, man. Go on.
And I guess from a recruitment perspective, so I guess when you are looking to add to your team, or when you have in the past, are there certain traits or characteristics that you are ideally looking for in candidates? And I guess a lot of that you've already discussed around culture and so on, but be keen to just hear some of, for example, you mentioned the candidate that you met recently who you met just the once because of obviously the restrictions in place. But I guess what did you see in that person which gave you the comfort that actually we can go ahead with hiring this person?
Yeah, there's a number of things to do, and to an extent this comes back to the difference between something slightly more established and something still in development. I mean, look, what am I looking for in terms of when we're recruiting somebody? We do job specs. So again, it's back to this question that because we're a constrained organization, the traditional thing is ops is not necessarily top of the totem pole. So if you're going to make an ops hire, then you need to be bloody sure that, that was even worse than the use of the word old, wasn't it? So you got to be relatively certain that A, there's a need, and B, what sort of level that you're pitching that up. And it was one of the conversations I had with Ahmed fairly early on. So it's a bit of a step function. So there's a certain amount of stuff that you can do, then you've got to hire more people. Otherwise, it's an unacceptable risk. But you then buy yourself capacity. So if you're looking at stuff long term, what are we looking to achieve? What's the remit? I guess that's the starting point. The next thing is, what have I got? What do I need? So you obviously want to give people a little bit of elbow room to develop, but not to the extent that they are spread sufficiently thinly that stuff that you expect to get done isn't getting done. It's then, okay, if we want to hire somebody, it's not necessarily me that's going to be doing the hiring because I have my sort of, I had 3 number 2s effectively. So who do they want to hire, right? And again, it develops then in terms of, I'm overseeing them managing another person, right? So how do you organize yourself when you're not expected just to roll your sleeves up and do it yourself, okay?
Yep.
Then it's, okay, what are the traits that we want? So do we want the finished article? We probably don't. When we go down long list, short list, it's a sort of sifting process as to what do we think of these people. And then it's an interview process. And personally, the interview process for me is I could probably tell in about 5 minutes whether this person is capable of doing what I've got down on the job spec or not.
Yeah.
Right? It's then down to, am I going to get on with this person because I'm going to have to work with them? And then it's not just me. One of the things that we do at the Zetland is the interview. If we're interviewing somebody, it's probably quite a wide pool. And again, this is back to sort of we haven't got huge amounts of money to throw around. So every HR, every hire is quite a big thing. So are we going to get on with them? Because if what we're trying to do is build a culture, you're either going to fit or you're not.
Yep.
And if we don't think you're going to fit culturally, and that's with me hiring people in my team, the majority of the interview, then yeah, is it really a good idea? You might be technically competent, but you might be somebody who's just diametrically not going to fit rather obviously.
Yeah.
So the how you mesh into the organization is quite important. But again, you know, everyone sort of puts it down chemistry, that sort of thing. And, you know, if I'm entirely honest, you've got to contend with me. And I can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Interesting, shall we say.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, I mean, we're up for training people, which is, to me, one of the key things.
Yep.
We're not typical, though. I don't think we're typical. So, you know, the two guys that you hired through me, I'm deliberately not mentioning their names, and I would rather you didn't. You could sit them down and talk to them, and it would be interesting to see what they say. I mean, I'm going to do the self-serving thing now. You know, I won that COO of the Year award.
Yeah. One
of the gratifying things is that I got nominated. One of the nominees was my team. So. Yeah, it was quite touching. You know, you've done the right thing. You've definitely recruited the right people if they're doing that to you, or they're trying to push you out the door.
Oh no, it's nice to have that affirmation.
But yeah, it's a little bit of affirmation, and from a personal point of view, it means you're doing a good job with respect to the people that you work with, and to me, that's important. And it comes into how I would hire people as well. So, do I think I can develop you? Yeah. Do I think you'll fit in with the people who are already there? Yeah. You obviously go through interview processes. We will put case studies up, that sort of stuff, so we can just test on how you think about things. So it's not a process. Being interviewed at Zetland is not a process for the faint-hearted, but you know, if you can get in through the door, it's a great place to work.
Yeah. So I guess given, and you mentioned you currently have, I guess, 2 number 2s, and there is a broad pool of talent out there who are kind of operating at that number 2 level and seeking ways in which they can make it into the hallowed turf of a CFO or COO. What advice would you? Sorry,
I don't know about hallowed.
But what advice would you give to those, I guess, younger, upcoming? Sorry, I've just given you a hard time for using the word old. Now I've said younger, but
you have to write lines after school now.
Yeah, the up and coming talent pool that I guess don't necessarily have that guidance as to how to get to that level, but are eager to push to get there. You know, when the time is right.
Yeah, look, be true to yourself, be confident in yourself, be true to yourself. A lot of this, to be honest, it's down to the organization that you work in. Just keep your eyes open.
And I guess with yourself as an example now, Malcolm, kind of, you know, speaking to various CFOs and COOs especially during the last year, discussing things like self-development and self-improvement, etc. What are there any tips or habits that you've adopted over the years that
the self-reflection thing is actually quite important. So it's back to the can we do what we've just done better? I used to do it on the train ride, but of course I haven't been on a train for a very so it's building in that time. You're going to be busy whatever you do, and look, for up and coming number 2s, that sort of thing, it is that what can I do to make myself the sort of slightly more complete article? So where do I think my skill sets are? What can I develop? What do I think I need to develop? How do I do that? And a lot of this stuff is just being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And again, I'm in an unfortunate position because the challenges at Altima were many. I mean, it was a fantastic place to learn. You come in the morning, it's like, okay, where are we going to go today? And you learn to adapt fairly quickly. And as I said, I'm sort of fortunate with that. in that it was sort of a fairly hard driving organization. But when sort of things turned, you probably learned a lot more then.
Yep.
And I think personally that stood in good stead of what happens when things go wrong. And, you know, that's 13 years ago now, 12, 13 years ago. It's a long time. It goes quickly.
Yep.
So always, I would suggest if you're up and coming, see what you can get out of the guy who's in the seat. Just in terms of experience, war stories, whatever.
Yep.
Don't necessarily be backwards in coming forwards, but obviously it depends on the organization that you work, because that might not be appreciated always. Lots of training, lots of development, just take on more responsibility.
Yep.
Those would be my tips.
Yeah.
In terms of my personal development, it's where do we want to go? How do we do it? How do I just make sure that we're efficient in what we do? And again, as I said, let's look at what the role is. It's managing, mitigating operational risk, and it's getting stuff done. Right. So how do we get stuff done better and with less risk? How do we grow the organization without it falling on its face? And I'm supposedly I'm the conservative one. I'm the guy that will say no, which again will irritate, but yeah, I'm doing it for the right reasons, and that's kind of it. But you do reflect on, am I being over conservative? Am I not being over conservative? Is it the right thing? You don't want to get to the stage that you're second guessing yourself, but there's always room for improvement. Doesn't matter who you are.
Yep.
So, you know, the self-reflection point, and you know, sort of circle back on that. It's a difficult thing to do self-reflection with your team or a wider team, because, you know, and I've been doing this a long time. I'm quite experienced, and I'm supposedly the guy with all the answers, or am I? Right. So you've got to park the ego.
Yep.
You've got to sit there. You've got to be capable of listening. You've got to be capable of taking on others' ideas. And some of them are great, some of them won't be great. If they're not great, well, okay, fine. But you need to listen to the dodgy ones to do the great ones. In terms of my own self-development, certainly over the course of the past 2-3 years, it's that. It's listening.
Yep.
And it's listening, it's reflecting, it's how am I doing the right thing by the organization? How am I doing the right things by clients? How am I doing the right thing by my colleagues? How can I make it better? And that would feed through into, am I doing the right, how am I doing better things by myself?
Yep. Okay. So a sum of the parts, as it were.
Absolutely, yeah. I think if you end up just doing the collection of individuals, you make mistakes, and it will bite you on the derriere. So, I enjoy working with Zetland. I enjoy working with my team. I think they're going on great. I put them up against most people.
Yep. Brilliant. So I guess the final part of this podcast then, Malcolm, I guess for me, kind of 2 final questions for you, and they're more forward-looking, if that's okay. But I guess from your perspective, or from the team's perspective, what do you feel will be the key areas for the team or the business over the next 12 to 24 months?
For the business, we're raising our second fund at the moment. So we are pretty much there and deploying our first fund, which is fantastic. I mean, we have a very active pipeline, and the deal guys are working really, really hard and quite effectively, just in terms of finding opportunities and deploying. Right. So we want to get fund 2 done and closed, and just carry on deploying that. There's some thematic stuff that we're looking at as well, some of which is sort of relatively innovative, and it's sort of growing selectively, sort of growing the business that way. So certainly from a let's develop things, that's it. It's pipeline. And I must admit, I haven't seen such a good pipeline since I've been at Zetland. And it's just going. Whoa. So yeah, and the great thing is the strategy sort of proved itself last year when it was difficult-ish because you couldn't physically go and inspect stuff in Italy or wherever. So we looked at sort of liquid market credit dislocation there, and that's worked quite well. So the strategy itself working. The amount we're deploying this year should mean that Fund 2, Fund 2 is fantastic because we will be deploying pretty quickly. So there's a certain amount of scarcity value in terms of getting early folks, avoid disappointment. And then from a sort of team point of view, it is supporting that, but it's also developing that. So as I said, we did quite a lot of work around the transition from Fund 1 to Fund 2 to make Fund 2 better. And this is taking into account that we moved, Fund 1 was Cayman, Fund 2 is Luxembourg. So there's a certain amount of element with that. But if we want to do stuff that is thematic, how do we develop stuff further? So, part of this is product development, part of this is execution, just in terms of pushing stuff forwards. Inevitably, it's sort of, I think we're shifting gears now from the sort of small, in a small office startup. We're getting bigger, and I think some of the issues there are around, is there a little bit of a step change just in terms of what we do? But there are we have an infrastructure within the organization that's taken care of that, which is fantastic because it means I don't have to.
Yep.
It's not necessarily my forte anyway, but things like employee wellness, building culture, diversity, all the ESG initiatives, that sort of thing. So we're building them on the investment side, that we have capacity in the organization for the other side. So what I would, if I was to sort of look back in 2 years' time, what would I hope that we've achieved is we've raised and pretty much deployed Fund 1. We will have deployed Fund 2, maybe raising Fund 3 at that point, and or anything else thematic. We will be a bigger organization, but I don't, you would hope there isn't going to be a huge amount of turnover.
No, agreed. Yeah, and that I guess goes back to the point around culture. But no, look, promising and exciting times ahead.
Well, quality problems I like.
Yeah. So now, I guess the final part, and for me, this is probably my favorite question. But let's imagine you are sat here with Malcolm, mini Malcolm, Malcolm Jr., whatever you want to, the younger version of yourself. So Malcolm, when he was perhaps training to be an accountant or just coming after qualifying, what
stopped and become a lawyer, I think. Yeah.
Are there, I appreciate there's probably many snippets of wisdom and knowledge that you would share, but if you were to narrow it down to 2 or 3 points, what advice would you give to a younger you?
What advice would I give to a younger me? That's a really, really interesting question. It's also quite a difficult one to answer because where have I ended up? I've ended up at Zetland. Zetland suits my character. Not everywhere will suit my character. So, as I said, a lot of this is sort of kind of being true to yourself. So, you can live a lie and get paid an awful lot of money if you're that way inclined. If I was to give advice to myself just in terms of technical stuff, I think the 2 things I would look at is the idea about keeping things simple. I mean, I've done 20 years of product development. If you want to make it complicated, I can do it with the best of them. I think I've done probably 30 fund launches, and maybe 10 other structured product launches and then liquidations, that sort of stuff. You get to the stage where you start confusing your LPs. So simplicity works. So that would be one tip. So just distill everything down into its component parts. The other thing I'd say is, and again, this is quite a difficult thing for people to take, and is do not be afraid of expressing your views. Obviously, I would put a little bit of care on that because you can make yourself thoroughly unpopular. So one of the things about lockdown is we don't have sort of social interaction to moderate things. So, you don't want to be the sort of archetypal internet warrior view. But if you have a view on how you can improve things, the worst thing you can do is keep it to yourself, right? And I think the experience of this, where it's always a sort of matter of regret, where you could have stopped something and you didn't because you were trying to play the game, and then it comes back and bites you on the derriere. So that was the other thing. There was a third thing that jumped into my head and jumped out. It was actually quite important. The younger me, God, that was a horrible thought. The other thing is it's just being aware of what the opportunities are, right? I remember what it was, and then you jumped out of my head again. But it's sort of just keeping your eyes open.
Yep.
Right. What do I want to do? And it's one of those things. And again, it's difficult. It depends on your life cycle. But you always think that I wish I'd done that is a bad thing. Why did I do that is probably a better thing. So think about what risk you're happy taking. I mean, for example, I've not worked overseas. I'd quite like to. Maybe I'm getting a little bit old. Things like that. I've done it. I was a head of sales. It wasn't something I particularly enjoyed, but I did it. And I was sort of head of marketing at an investment bank, so I put in global CRM systems. Again, it's fine. It's sort of an element of that. But when it comes to investor relations in this, it's another string that you've done. So take your opportunities. You don't know where they're going to end up. If you're going to map a career 20 years out, you're going to be disappointed. So look at sort of fairly short term. Just look at the opportunities.
Brilliant.
Is that all?
Yeah, no, thank you, Malcolm. It's been, as always, insightful, entertaining. But thank you for your time. I guess hopefully let's see how it's received, and no doubt you will inspire continue to inspire not just your team, but hopefully people in the wider private equity community.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that I do want to say is everyone is this version of what is a COO, and what's a chief operating officer, because it covers a multitude of sins. For those out there who do this, you are unsung heroes, right? And I would sort of publicly say this, certainly about my team. An organization that doesn't function without a good COO, right? And you do get sort of situations where people will turn around and go, well, they're a call center. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Try operating without them, see how far you get. And as I said, if you get a good chief financial officer or a chief operating officer, if you're just looking at financial terms, it will save you money over the long term. It provides the opportunity to put in a robust framework. And if you get the right COO, you've seen organizations that sort of go through COOs like they're going out of fashion. Okay, fine. That's a box checking exercise. For those of you out there who do this role, you will appreciate how difficult it is. And if there's sort of stuff that I can do that articulates why I think the role is important and why the role is actually important, just in terms of risk management, the PM manages the assets, you manage the liabilities, okay? Or, he does the P&L, do the balance sheet. Okay, the P&L is what gets you paid. The balance sheet is what kills you. And just look at it in terms of what the value of a COO is. You can't build a house from the roof down. So any analogy you like with the sweeper, with the goalkeeper, with the foundations, whatever, that's the value. It's the bedrock of the organization. And as I said, I've been fortunate in that I work with an organization that understands that and allows that to be developed.
Yep.
So all you COOs out there,
keep up the good work.
Keep up the good work.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again, Malcolm. Thanks for your time. And I look forward to catching up with you shortly.
I look forward to that as well.
Okay.
All right, good sir.
Thank you.
See you anon.
See you. Bye-bye.